Voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Dave Thomas. Toronto Argonauts coming up, Dave. The positional chart was released. First thing jumps out at anybody is Carey is not in the lineup.
Yeah, Ryder's not going to play Ka'Deem Carey this week against his former team, the Toronto Argonauts, and it's simply a numbers game. And when the Riders signed Ka'Deem Carey, they were quite upfront and said, okay, it's a practice roster spot, and that's where he's been put down, is back on the practice roster. It's a practice roster position, but hey, if we've got an opportunity, we're going to work you in. Last week, with the injury to Thomas Bertrand-Hudon, the opportunity was there, and the Riders worked in Ka'Deem Carey. This week, though, Thomas Bertrand-Hudon is available, comes back in, and couple that with the injury to Sam Emilus, the foot injury will keep him out at least this week, so that means that you've got to bring in a receiver, and next man up in the depth chart happens to be an American, and that's Joe Robustelli. So you bring Joe in, which means that the roster, you put in one American, you got to take out another. And that's also the other side of the Ka'Deem Carey story. So I know that he was really jacked up about getting an opportunity to play his former team, but that's unfortunately not going to be the case in case something drastically changes overnight.
I think you explained that perfectly. Everybody in the room good with that? Like, that's the bouncing ball to follow, because the ratio thing, and a lot of us, we pay attention to it, right? But there's the tricks to it. And as soon as MLS was rolled out, I was like, ooh, what is that? What is that going to mean? Now, you mentioned that, Carey was this was laid out beforehand, where they stood with running backs, practice roster spot, all that. From what you know of him so far, he's just going to kind of roll with it. It's his former team, right? There's got to be a sense of disappointment. You're not playing. How do you think he's reacting inside and going to react, Dave?
Well, from what he told me yesterday, he was extremely excited about the opportunity to play in this game because he felt that he had a distinct advantage over the Toronto Argonauts because he knew what they were going to do. He was around them throughout training camp, and he said, they don't know what I'm going to do. So he was obviously jacked up about that. And then the whole idea that, hey, he'll be presented with a Grey Cup ring, right? Because he hasn't got it yet. And so when the visiting players come back in, as you saw with Calgary last week, they get presented with their Grey Cup ring. So he talked about how it was going to go as a memento of the year that was, but he said that it had already kind of been tarnished a little bit in the way that things had ended. So there is definitely emotion. And when someone lets you go and says you're not good enough, you know that you want to go ahead and prove them wrong. And he thought that this was going to be an opportunity to do that. The one other point of the conversation that we did have yesterday with Ka'Deem was talking a little bit about if he had something to prove going back. And he said, no, I don't. But you look at the injury situation that the Toronto Argonauts find themselves in right now with a big American running back out. You know they'd love to have him back, and he doesn't even want to entertain that thought.
Okay, let's talk about Toronto and injuries in a second. But the one thing, just to put a bow on this, that I want to talk about is Thomas Bertrand-Hudon is in the lineup. The last time he played, he was really good for the Riders. So I think all Rider Nation, it's probably a little disappointment that you're not going to see Carey in the lineup, but a lot of excitement for Rider Nation to have the train back in.
Absolutely. And again, you felt terrible for him. He had such a great opening game, and then he gets dinged up in practice, right? Tweaks the groin muscle. So he's out for a little over a week, but hopefully he's back and ready to go. And again, picks up where he left off because, there's the old adage that you never lose your job due to injury. And I assume that you could probably make that case for Thomas Bertrand-Hudon and the fact that he played well enough and beyond well enough to keep his spot on the roster in week 1.
Toronto's banged up, Dave.
Oh, yeah, that's an understatement. You think that the Saskatchewan Roughriders are in injury trouble. They've got to make 8 changes to the Toronto Argonauts. And I'm not talking like 4 players in, 4 players out. I'm talking 8 players in, 8 players out from last week's roster for the Toronto Argonauts. And we're not talking about the backup long snapper. Right? Like, you've got 2 offensive linemen that you've got to take out of your lineup from a week ago that played. You've got Deveris Daniels, one of the top receivers in the game, who is also going to be out. Winton McManus, arguably the top linebacker in the Canadian Football League, is going to be out. So these aren't, every injury is significant, but this is extraordinarily significant if you're a Toronto Argonaut right now.
As you speak, I am going to my gambling app to hammer the Riders and the points on this. That is really interesting. Brett Lawther, and I know you call the game for the team, expecting a bounce back from him.
Absolutely. You could see the determination that he had on his face in game number 1. And a couple of the things, like he talked about that this is a Grey Cup team, not if he's on it. And he talked about if he's worthy of being around the team. And he apologized to his teammates once again. And he talked about holding the team back. And again, a great level and measure of accountability. But he's shown in the past an ability to turn the page on that real quick, right? So that's what I'm really excited to see. How is he going to turn the page? Because he says that all I need to do is go 1 for 1. That's the mentality. One kick, go put it through the uprights. He doesn't want to make any excuses from Hamilton, whether it was hold or wind or anything else. He's shouldered the blame for his performance 2 for 5 a week ago, and he's ready to put it behind him. He says, I just wish I wouldn't do that to myself because I work all off season to make sure that I'm in a good spot to be consistent through and through. And then I go and do this to myself again, he said.
I'm looking at the forecast for Saturday, and with the lake and a lot of things can change. It's breezy. 32K winds it's calling for Saturday in Toronto, and some rain. That when you're in a little bit of a funk, I guess, as a kicker. Hey, I've never been a professional place kicker. Played golf, and the last thing when your swing isn't good, the last thing you want to play in is a bunch of wind and rain. So I'm curious on the forecast a little bit, Dave, now that I look at it.
Well, you want to add one more in? They're playing on grass. Right. Ka'Deem Carey alluded to perhaps the gamesmanship that happens in Toronto where, you water the grass a little more significantly than you normally would prior to a game so that the home team knows what spikes are going to go out and wear and so on and so forth. Now, again, put that out of your mind. It's not an excuse. It's not going to happen. Coach Mace coached there. He told his players, he's coached his players on what they need to wear. But again, you want to add another little level of intrigue. So there's wind, there's cold, and now there's grass that you're kicking on.
Well, they should have had him practicing on grass. Did we still have that little practice field beside Old Taylor Field that he could have went out there and ripped balls at? I don't know. Or has that been abandoned or something going on there? Yeah. Hey, that's good insight. Anything else, Dave, before we let you go that's jumping out on you now that the positional chart has been released, or anything on the other side of the ball?
Potential for the trap game is the one that jumps out on my mind, right? Like, again, you can't let your foot off the gas. And these are professional athletes. I don't think that they will. But the trap being, of course, you look at the scene and, okay, Toronto doesn't have their starting quarterback. They're 0-2. They didn't look real good. They played well in spurts for sure over the first 2 weeks, but they haven't consistently strung it together. Now you add in all those injuries. They're both coming off the same amount of rest. However, the Riders have traveled east twice in consecutive weeks. Again, could you this is one of those ones that could jump up and surprise you. I think the Riders need to get off to a good start. They haven't scored a point in the opening quarter yet this season. So if they can get off to a good start, things will be well. But boy, there's a lot of things that are like, ooh, this could be kind of a tricky trap game.
I'm taking the Riders minus 3.5 sitting right in front of me here all day long. I might tease. I might take the Riders -7 at this point with the insight that you've given us, Dave. Okay, travel safe. Travel safe. Have a good time in the big smoke. Tell Luke we say hi, and looking forward to the call.
Thanks. I was going to say, if you wanted to show your supreme confidence, do what Luke does and bet my money.
Classic Luke. That is voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Dave Thomas.